People that sleep less than 6 hours a day, how do you function? Write in the comments what you think about this. Enjoy the show. Story 1. I work at an Amazon FC from 7 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. the next day for 4 days and then rest 3. Those 4 days I sleep as soon as I get home at 7 a.m. and wake up at 12 noon. The first few weeks were hard because I was more asleep than awake. And now months later, I'm doing better, but I know it's not healthy. Those 4 days I don't feel so sleepy, but on my rest days I get all the tiredness and it's brutal. It takes me 2 days to recover the sleep cycle, but it is of little use if the next day I start the routine again. Story 2. I generally sleep 4-5 hours a day. I'd love to sleep more, I just can't. I don't set an alarm. My body just won't sleep longer than about 5 hours most of the time. But once or twice a year, I go to bed and sleep for 10-12 hours and I wake up feeling great. As for how do I function normally, I suppose, I've been sleeping that way for so long I can't really remember what it's like to sleep longer. I don't think lack of sleep affects my performance. I manage my career and parenthood. I get things done that need to be done. I am tired a lot but not sleepy. The only area I can think of where it may affect me is I don't work out like I'd like to. Perhaps if I were less fatigued, I'd have more energy to do so. Story 3. Well, I don't drink coffee to wake up. Growing up, I was never really allowed to be grumpy in the morning, but to be awake at a moment's notice. Mix this with having experience of friends whom were suicidal, made me a very light sleeper if they're in the same building as me, or wake up immediately for a late-night desperate call. So with all that, I'm a very light sleeper who usually sleeps small hours at a time and no grumpy attitude. Since it's my normal, I get annoyed when people are grumpy in the morning or get addicted to things like coffee being a crutch for their shitty attitude. Like, grow up, I'm tired too. Story 4. I did high school and uni on 2 hours of sleep night. Not great, but as long as I kept going, it was doable. Only when I got to actually rest, aka holidays, would I basically collapse. Anything optional, social life, family events, hobbies, etc., was skipped to conserve energy. Finally managed to get sleep meds a few years ago, so now I sleep like 7 hours on night. Don't feel any less exhausted though. Story 5. I work out and you'd say I'd sleep pretty well after workout, 2 beers and a good meal. Yet my body always wakes me up after 6 hours. I feel like I'd sleep 5 more but just can't, no matter how tired I am. But I do have lots of energy and don't feel that tired after an hour or so after waking up. Story 6. I did high school and uni on 2 hours of sleep a night. Not great, but as long as I kept going, it was doable. Only when I got to actually rest, aka holidays, would I basically collapse. Anything optional, social life, family events, hobbies, etc., was skipped to conserve energy. Finally managed to get sleep meds a few years ago, so now I sleep like 7 hours/night. Don't feel any less exhausted though. Story 7. When you get older, you will sleep less and wake more times at the middle of the night. I am 60. When I work, I am tired and I fall asleep easily. At weekends, it's harder and I wake up at the middle of the night 2 or 3 times. When I was younger, I was able to sleep until noon. Story 8. Laundry is a priority, walking the dog too. Working 70-80 HRS per week requires it. Cut out anything you don't actually need. Social media, entertainment, friends who don't understand, video games. Eat healthy no matter what. Meal prep is important, or having constant free access to food that's not terrible through work. Caffeine. Tylenol/Advil/Aleve here and there. Getting more than 4 HRS twice a week seems to be decent for me, and I can run for 6 days straight off of 4 HRS before I start to fall apart. Story 9. I hover between 5-7 hours on average, usually between 6.5, and I honestly function well. I basically give my body about an 8-hour window every night, 10-6, but I either don't fall asleep until about 11:30 or midnight, or if I do fall asleep at 10, I'm wide awake by 4. I just let my body tell me when it's refreshed, and then go from there. The only time I sleep a lot would be to catch up from sleep deprivation, if I only get like 2-4 hours of sleep due to stress or whatever. Thankfully, it doesn't happen a lot, but that's the only time I've had 8-10 hours of sleep. People typically fall in different natural sleep cycles based on a lot of factors. I know some people that function on like 4 hours of sleep, and I know others that need at least like 9 or 10 to function. Story 10. I have chronic insomnia and bipolar, and if I sleep less than 6 hours one night, I'm still pretty functional the next day, if a bit headachy. If I go a second night with less than 6 hours, then I'm dramatically worse, and 3 nights in a row or more can trigger a bipolar episode and fuck up the next 2 months plus of my life. Sleep is very important for people with bipolar disorder, and missing out on too much of it is very bad for us. I usually take a sedative to ensure I sleep, but sometimes it just doesn't work. My mom used to joke she was going to smack me over the head with a hammer to get me to sleep, and the image of my tiny mom with a giant hammer bigger than her often gets me giggling when I can't sleep and makes me feel a bit better. Story 11. We're not. It's either sleep for 7, 8 hours and have zero time to myself after a long workday and returning home to a family that needs me, or sleeping 5, 6 hours to get an hour or two by myself in the peace and quiet. I sometimes choose to sleep instead of stay up for a bit, but if I do this too long, I can feel my mental health declining fairly rapidly. Weekends I'm the worst though, since I know I'll be out doing fun stuff with the family rather than challenging work, so I stay up later and get very tired later in the day. Story 12. Due to severe anxiety and depression, which caused mild insomnia, I averaged 3-4 hours of sleep per day. Caffeine was a crutch, but it destroyed my stomach at the same time, particularly because your metabolism just doesn't work perfectly when you're running on that little sleep. I had low energy, motivation, and no ambition whatsoever, so it didn't bother me to keep going like that. Took a massive amount of effort to get out of it, and now I average 6-7 hours per day, and I'm doing anything I can to prevent myself from going back to living like that. Story 13. Not great. Rarely get more than 4 hours on weekdays, usually less. Always tired and messes with both my physical and mental health. I work at a computer and I do notice sometimes I can't help but microsleep. Eventually it stacks up, and the only free day I have, Sunday, I usually crash for an insane amount of time just to try and get back to something less groggy. Have tried just about everything under the sun to help. Short of a sleep study, my HMO won't approve it, and it really hasn't fixed it. Story 14. Sleep apnea combined with working overnight shifts for about 8 years now. How do I function? Barely hanging on. Trying to sleep with a CPAP, but it's hard to get used to. Always tired during the day. I can't function unless I take a nap during the day. It's a constant state of trying to stay awake. I've gotten used to it, but it's hard. Definitely not healthy whatsoever, but it's a poisonous cycle. Due to being tired, I don't want to exercise and then eat poorly, which in turn makes me even more tired. Story 15. I've noticed whenever I don't sleep or don't sleep well, and forgive me if I don't explain this well enough, but I always find myself forcing me to have fun or try doing different, exciting things in order to stay awake. On the surface, that doesn't sound like a bad thing, but it depresses me to holy hell because it's not an organic brand of enjoyment. Just an attempt to avoid habit and routine, and sometimes an empty one. Story 16. My usual is 5-6 hours of sleep every night. It is simply just normal to me. My body will not allow me to sleep any more than that. I've been this way since high school, but every now and then, maybe once every or every other month, I feel like it catches up to me. I'll sleep for an entire weekend, only waking up briefly to eat or use the bathroom from Friday night, Sunday night. Story 17. I am French and live in Paris. My job was linked to the Olympics, and so for 2 weeks, I literally just slept 2 to 3 H per day, and not even during nights, but between 14 H and 17 H. It was the worst experience of my life, especially that it lasted too long. It had a medical impact. I had like blood pressure problem. I was kind of humanly different, very more aggressive. It's like a dark hole. You go deeper and deeper. Human body should not work like that. Everybody that lived like that lose at least 10 years of life in good health. So yeah, the only impact on that, it's worst and shorter life. I have nothing else to say. Story 18. I have been sleeping 5-6 hours a night for ages. I'm now in my 40s. It may get worse once I'm in perimenopause. However, I live by the I'll sleep when I'm dead lifestyle. I want to enjoy as much time on this earth as possible. How do I function? Caffeine. I also work home 95% of the time, so that helps as well, not having to get ready for work and drive somewhere. Story 19. I'm still 18 and I'm going to university. I hope my schedule is still well because I always get 8-10 hours of sleep, and I feel either sleepy or just not tired at all. I don't drink coffee. I have a fear that university and part-time can make my sleep schedule so bad that I just can't function anymore. I need sleep, but I need to live my life as well. It's hard living life thinking about it. Story 20. I used to do this. Your body gets used to being exhausted, but you're not healthy. But once you've conditioned your body to only receiving 5 hours or so of sleep a day, then you got to find fuel some other way. May it be coffee or sugar or both. I used to go to work, then enjoy the nightlife only to be done by 6 a.m. and go to work again at 11 a.m. Looking back to it now, I just don't know how I did that. Story 21. I basically run on pure hatred for being awake at this point. I can't have caffeine due to heart problems, but even if I did, it just makes me more tired than I would be without it, since it overworks my heart and wears me out fast. I also have an easier time falling asleep for a nap than I do actually going to bed. But if I take a nap, I'll be going to bed even later than I normally would. Definitely passed out at work a time or two. Story 22. Great, actually. Been sleeping less than 6 hours for at least a decade, 35 now. Libido is high, exercise, mental function is good, stress levels are moderate. I can't say I'm always at 100%, but I also smoke a shitload of weed and tobacco, currently working on lowering my intake and exercising with a trainer. I also microdose silo and tail reishi, cordyceps, lion's mane daily. If I continue with my personal betterment, I might live past 45. Story 23. Life goes on and on and on. Jokes aside, I'll answer as if you're asking for tips. Always keep your mind busy on a task. Set a large goal, then find all the steps to achieve set goal in baby steps every day. Try to achieve one or more of those steps on top of your day-to-day life. Story 24. Raising kids taught me that I can survive on 3 hours of sleep and get through the day on 5. Every few weeks, I will drop dead at 6 p.m. and sleep for 12 hours, and then it begins anew. Whenever possible, a power nap at noon will be very helpful, though not necessary. Story 25 depends on the situation. I've been the single parent of 2, who were younger than 2 years old. I've been the primary caregiver for a spouse fighting cancer and ultimately in home hospice. In times like those, you simply do what needs to be done because it needs to be done, and there may be no other option. I've been a stupid young single person with a job and an overly energized social life. Again, you do what you gotta do, assuming you want to keep the job and that the party life is that important to you. But also, I've been at just a mellow place in my life where I enjoy sitting up late and reflecting on my day, while I also enjoy getting up early and watching a sunrise while I plan my goals for the day. So it's hard for me to give a single answer. Some people are just wired different and don't need as much sleep. And then there are some that are put in a position where they're simply not allowed much sleep. Not everyone is built to survive the latter. Story 26. There was a time when I was in my early 20s that I would average 5 hours of sleep. I look at those pictures of myself and IDK how I didn't know it was killing me. I'm 33 now and look younger than I did when I was 25. But TBH, I still get nights where I sleep only 5 hours. I generally just make sure I'm hydrated, have some caffeine, and when I get home from work, I try and sleep hard to make it up. Story 27. As you can see by the other answers, some people just don't need that much sleep due to genetics. Others can cheat the sleep time by doing polyphasic sleep. You sleep at night for 6H and take a 20 minutes nap or 2 during the day. I did that in university without any issues. Was actually feeling better than now. Probably because I was also 10 years younger. If you don't have enough time to sleep, try that. Story 28. With duct tape, glitter, and Jesus, LOL. I'm sometimes quite literally ripping at the seams, sleepy as heck, but I rotate some green tea and some matcha, so it's healthier than coffee, in the day and make sure to take my vitamins. I take hormones for endometriosis that causes severe insomnia and depression. Story 29. I am one of these people. I've slept for 3 hours every night for a few years of my life. Now I get around 4 or 5 hours on most nights. But my productivity has remained the same. I get asked a lot about this, but I don't really have a perfect answer. I just happen to be able to relax without having to sleep, and that probably helps me compensate for the lesser hours of sleep. Story 30. There are a lot of variables with individuals and sleep. I've had long stretches of time over a year with just 4 hours per night. I've also had times in which 6 HRS was my norm. I definitely felt better on 6 than on 4, but it wasn't as big a difference as others I know who are useless on less than 6 HRS of sleep. As an adult, I've never been able to get 8 HRS, even with medication and excellent sleep hygiene, which is an average of what people need and not the standard for all people. There are people I know who don't feel fully rested unless they get at least 9 hours of sleep. From my experience, that's like saying it's not working out unless you've run 26 miles beforehand. I function fine, work full-time in a demanding job, and hardly even think about sleep anymore. People are adaptable. If you're curious, when much younger, I went to the doctor several times for sleep issues, was prescribed different types of medication. They either did not work or worked for only a very short period of time. Haven't taken anything for many years now. Story 31. Well, you function, but at what cost is the question. Definitely increased risk for stress-induced cardiovascular diseases, burnout, etc., and most likely will die a few years earlier. But you won't really notice the difference most times, as genetics are the main reason some get like 90 plus and are still very agile, and others pass away with 70, 80-ish. So a lot to argue, but it ain't healthy, that's a fact. Story 32, I actually function pretty well. When I was younger, I used to sleep 4-6 hours and feel great. Eventually, I got a desk job, gained some weight, and developed OSA. I would sleep for blocks of up to 10 hours and never feel great. Now with a CPAP, I'm losing a lot of weight and back to the 4-6 hour sleeping pattern and feeling a lot better again. I can't easily sleep 8 unless I'm completely physically exhausted or sick now. Story 33. If I get anything more than 6 hours of sleep, I wake up feeling groggy, sore, and often with a headache and anxiety. I'm crazy productive after only 6 hours of sleep and waking up early. I just have to keep moving, but I do inevitably crash about 12 hours later. I can't nap to save my life, though. Never been able to. I thought that would change as I've gotten older, but it hasn't yet. Story 34. Poorly. But you do get used to it. You come to terms with the fact that your brain will not function as highly as when you were getting decent sleep. It does make those days when you get decent, restful sleep feel like you're on top of the world, though. I pretty much mainlined caffeine to survive and function until I was diagnosed with POTS. Now I focus more on hydration and electrolyte balance. When my potassium and sodium levels drop, the brain fog gets really bad. To keep my energy and alertness up. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.